Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another ITY video. I'm here today at the ISACA Oceania 2017 conference in Canberra, and with me is Anil Bhandari. He's the Chief Mentor at Arcon Techsolutions, a global company specialising in risk control solutions and one of the sponsors of the ISACA Conference today. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Alex.
So look, let's start at the beginning. I thought if you could just please tell us, Anil, for those who aren't familiar with Arcon, what is the company's history, and a bit about your growth over the past decade and the sort of products and services that you're offering to the market today.
So I think, Alex, we basically, I historically for the last 20 years have been information risk management consultant, and I'm also a founder of a company called AMB, Assurance and Business Advisory, and that's started from just about 3 people, and it's now almost around 550 people company. Works very interestingly for almost all the telcos and the banks and insurance, mutual fund and pharmas and all of these industries.
So this is in India or globally?
This is in India, Middle East, Africa, and we've got offices in London, India, Middle East, Africa, Nairobi, and all of that.
And that's a big footprint.
And fairly well. Consulting companies are not easy to scale, and they do take time. And interestingly, we've been on the right side, and of course, there's been a lot of opportunities as well. But learning from all of this for the last 20 years, what we realized is that threats and ID controls on one side, they're all going to be dynamic. So threats and cybersecurity risk and all of that is going to be so dynamic that sometimes making sure that you do IT controls or mitigation strategies become very difficult. And I'm of a firm belief that in the next 1 decade, it's going to be even more dynamic from a digital disruption perspective, that you need automated solutions to be able to mitigate these kind of risks. And with that in mind, we invested in this company called Arcon. Arcon stands for Risk Control Solutions, and the intent was that we need to establish that anything which is repetitive, anything which has got threats and risk, is there an opportunity for us to capture that, convert it into an IP, innovate, and then control it from an automated perspective. And that's how mitigation probably would be better rather than having a systemic control or a manual control, so on and so forth. So
it's like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Absolutely. So I think what we're trying to do here is that governance, risk and compliance is becoming a very hot debate and discussion. Not really becoming, it's already it's already there for the last 2 decades, right? And it's going to be even more in the next maybe 10 or 20 years because organizations are dynamic, accounting systems are different, regulators are different across the world. So all of that put together.
Even biometric IDs and eye scanning.
That is a completely different world. And that is authentication, that would be biometrics and retina and all of that. So while you have the complexities of the authentication, you have a larger complexities because technology talks to each other. So just to give you a quick example, if there was a bank, a bank technologies does not work in isolation. It needs to talk to hundreds of systems within a bank, right? And then if you have this API banking which is expected to come, it's going to change it even further, and may try and address this if you have a question around it. But what I'm broadly trying to say is it's so complex that you need to be on top of it, and you need to figure out how to innovate to mitigate and control.
And for most companies, they're going to need external help, professional help to make this happen.
Absolutely. I think without external help to do this is difficult. For people who are working in an organization, most of the time their minds are constrained. I wouldn't say constrained, but occupied by what they try to do, and they're busy, and sometimes you have to tick the check boxes and stuff like that. So you need an external company to invest, innovate, and think about it. But having said that,
and ensure compliance.
Of course. But having said that, I think the internal guys are one of the best guys to be able to understand their vulnerabilities, and if they invest the time right, they are the best guys to understand how to plug that and how do you make use of all these vendors and how do you make use of all of these products in the market and stuff like that. So
now you started over a decade ago and you've expanded around the world, and you've recently come to Australia. Tell us a little bit about your journey into Australia. You must have had some local customers who were saying, hey, we need you here on the ground.
Yeah, so well, the journey is really interesting, and you're right. We started with risk control solutions just about a decade back, and interestingly, it's always difficult to do that. especially when you're starting off new. The competition is against the so-called big boys, like the IBMs and the CAs of the world.
All the established players.
And anytime that you walk into the room of a CIO, he's happier to take an IBM because you don't get fired for choosing an IBM.
Saying,
So it's a famous saying, right? And we literally see it on a daily basis. So yes, it was a difficult journey. We took 3 years to kind of establish and make sure that the product is mature and stuff like that. But I think we were lucky. We've got a couple of products which are actually on a fire to say that the market really wants to have these kind of products, embracing it. Typically one is the Privileged Access Management Solution, the PAM, and that gave us a lot of flair. So we started off and we're kind of leaders in the India market, the Middle East market, the Africa market. We've kind of become challengers now in Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. Japan is a very interesting territory for us. We've been there for the last 2 years now. So we've got a completely set of Japanese product, which is completely a different set. And we thought that Australia, historically, I'm not sure if I'm right, but what I learned from the market here is on the cusp of embracing all the changes in cybersecurity. And cybersecurity, I believe, is in the forefront of even the discussions that the Australian government is having within itself. And I believe with all of this in background, this would become a very interesting market for us.
The right time to get
right time. So I hope this is the right time and right place to get in. We've been here for the last 6 months, and we find this market to be so exciting that we've already got a request from 10 or large organizations to be able to come and demonstrate our solution, do a proof of concept, which is generally the first step getting to the final discussion. So I think last 3 months have been really interesting in Australia, and I've been traveling to Australia in the last about a month. At least 3 times I've been in Australia. So I guess we focused and we're investing in this market.
Sure. Now you're one of the sponsors at the ISACA Conference here today and tomorrow, and you've got one of the stands there. So what have been some of the questions and queries that people have been coming to you with to find out more about what you do and solutions for problems that they're having?
So I think there are all sorts of questions, but coming back to what we're doing, interestingly, Alex, if you see, the world has invested millions and millions of dollars around the periphery. So if you look at any organization, government, defense, all of that, they've invested millions of dollars trying to protect an attack coming from outside, a cyber attack or whatever. So everybody has a firewall, everybody has an IDS, and so on and so forth. To our surprise, and based on our consulting knowledge, we came to realize 10 years back that investments in protecting your technologies and systems and ability to close every possible door. Security principle, the first principle is close as many doors as possible. Unfortunately, that has not been done so very well in most of the organizations.
Well, a lot of internal users have super access.
So if internal users have super access, or the limited set of people having super access to almost all the technologies, while you have invested monies in Active Directory, biometrics for the end users, if I just have the access to a database, access to a SIS or a system, and do a select star on the customer table, and I were to just pick it up and put it on Google, an organization is going to be finished today. The reputation risk that it carries is phenomenal. Forget about the financial, nothing may happen, right? But the reputation risk is so high. So this area, I think, has been underinvested, and that is a place where we work with one of our solutions, which is the Privileged Access Management Solution, which creates an arc on top of your entire IT operations, DevOps and development shop and operating systems and databases. So we kind of guard the guards, right? We actually sit on top and make sure that everything is right.
Who watches the watchmen?
Who watches the watchmen? Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that we do. But interestingly, these watchmen are not few. These watchmen and guards and support staff are large, and this gets complicated by the fact that today most of it is outsourced. So you're co-sourcing technology to some third-party providers, outsourcing it, hosting it in the cloud, having managed service provider, having it in your data center. There's so much of complexity around this that there has to be holes around it, and we believe that we offer a solution which should help you to mitigate these.
Sure. Now you've got a risks to watch page on your website, and we'll go through that. Are there some slides you would like to show us?
So I think I would essentially want to talk about maybe the 1 or 2 other products that we have.
Sure, please.
Of course, Arcon is highly scalable. profitable company, so we are invested internally, and of course we work on advanced cyber risk, internal threats, and fraud risk. We also work on the cyber risk because while you may think about control setting on the data center, IT support, and servers, but essentially what does an attacker want? An attacker does not want your password because that's a normal user password.
Yeah.
Invariably, they want the passwords of super users,
The
and so on
network
and so
administrators
forth. So,
and those.
absolutely, and that's the time that you get control of not one box but several boxes. So, so this is what it is. I will skip this, but the solution not only controls the risk, but the solution also offers you efficiency. You know, currently there are multiple screens that one has to go through, and efficiency is really low. This actually creates a single window for you to be able to get into all of that. So this is the kind of screen that I'm talking about, which talks about the mesh, not the mess, but the mesh, which is currently the access control. But here you see it's all streamlined. It goes to your single window, and then you're able to access all of your devices and stuff like that. It could be cloud, it could be in-house, it could be a third-party managed data center. Let me just take you ahead. These are some features. I will like to skip this for the time being, but this is another solution that we have. This is a security compliance management solution. A lot of time is historically spent on trying to ensure that the configurations on your servers and systems and databases are correct and appropriate, because these are the low-hanging doors or the low-hanging fruits that an attacker would have to actually get into your system. This solution actually creates a single kind of a dashboard or a pie chart and gets you the entire IT operations in one view to say whether the security posture of your data center is appropriate or not. So it's an interesting one which baselines it and stuff like that. This is going to be futuristic. So we have a user behavior analytics solution which is going to change the dynamics of security. And Alex, I may want to add a couple of things here. Security, as you see today, is very cumbersome for people from a compliance perspective. It's restrictive as well. You're constraining people. You can't use a USB. You can't go to the internet. Why was the internet created? For efficiency. Why is the USB created? Absolutely. And why is the USB created? So that I can quickly take data and put it somewhere else. But now all of this is not allowed. Why? Because it's not, it's vulnerable, people can take out data, it's a security issue, and so on and so forth. I think in the next 10 years, security is going to be contextual, and it's not going to be device-based or a user-based, it's going to be contextual. And if it becomes contextual, then there may be a day when it comes and says that, hey, do whatever you want to, just don't worry about it.
Contextual is like AI-based.
AI-based. So user behavioral analytics is the first step in trying to be on top of your machine to say, guys, use and do what you want to do, we don't bother. But
it's like heuristics for humans.
Absolutely. So it has elements of artificial intelligence and machine learning. While you're allowed to do what you want to, but we would monitor and assess you at the right time.
If there's something going wrong, the alarm goes off.
Here is a solution which actually changes its own position, its own control systems internally
on the fly,
based on the understanding and of the records that you've done for the last several months, and then the auto learning to say that, for example, if you're working on an Excel sheet which has got credit card numbers and then you put in a USB, now I'm worried, right? So what do I do now? Do I monitor you? Do I protect it? And so on and so forth. So it's a very interesting one. I think this would take us in security in the predictive zone. So we've been always in the detective and then the preventive zone. So that's really the tagline of our company. If you look at it, predict, protect, and then prevent. So this would help us to move into the predictive zone. So this is what we are, more or less. Of course, we've got large enterprise accounts, and these are some of the largest banks that the world would probably see. Central banks of countries, defense, armies, secret services, across the spectrum of industries that you could probably think of and imagine.
And you probably have to click the escape key on your laptop there, or push the there was a couple of websites as well.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to show you the.
I'll just get out of it for you.
I think I just want to show you in a minute the risk to watch page. This is really interesting. If anybody has a couple of minutes and scans through this page for us.
Yeah, I'll just zoom right in onto it.
Yeah, this is protecting data in IoT era. I mean, you've got Elon Musk transforming this world. You've got self-driving cars. You've got rockets landing straight. You've got sensors everywhere that talk to each other. Can you imagine that if somebody were to hack into this, and believe me, it's not very difficult to do that.
People are already doing it,
because there are no authentication standards or mechanism. There are protocols, and if you understand it, you're able to do that. You could probably drive somebody to death, for example. Yeah.
There's been people hacking into Jeeps and
absolutely
things already. Yeah.
Can you imagine that if you have sensors across your house, and for example, I'm sure you would have a camera which is installed in your apartment or anywhere. You think you have access to that? Anybody can get into it and have access to that camera and watch it in his house. So
there's a famous story of a hacker looking at a baby and screaming at the baby to try and wake it up, and the parents walked in and what's this?
And this is so real.
Freaking out.
And people think that this is may come, about to come. I'm saying it's already there, knocking on your doorsteps, right?
Yeah.
So I believe there are similar kind of challenges. Is your organizations even equipped to timely detect any of this? Why is it important for you to look at resilience, for example? We spoke about resilience in the conference and had a very good discussion around it.
Yeah.
WannaCry, I mean, you've got to have malwares and stuff. So, for example, one of the articles written is on 3D printing. Now, what is the security risk of having 3D printers and 4D printers and so on and so forth? So I think this is a very interesting page that we have, and we keep publishing at least 1 or 2 articles every week.
Yeah.
And certainly talking about the future might be a good idea for anybody to just maybe kind of spend a couple of minutes on this and subscribe.
And just read it. Yeah. Now you already mentioned sort of things that you thought were coming in the future, but is there anything else you'd like to talk about how this will all evolve? I mean, you've kind of already covered it. AI-based security. There must be some other things.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I think somebody in the audience also asked us this, that how do we see this happening in the future? And I think the only answer that I have is, with an example, banking we thought would become and be run by telecommunication companies. And then we thought it might become crowdfunding, so you may not see banks tomorrow. But you have something which is called as API banking coming in, which means banking companies would actually become infrastructure providers and license providers. And you have these MNPs, so to call, aggregators, who would actually act as banks. Now, what's the challenge in security here? We protected every piece of information in a bank with our lives, right? Customer balances, transactions, their history, treasury systems, retail lending, all of that. And we thought that it's so important to actually put it in a bucket that nobody's able to actually move out of it, right? Saying that, it's like saying that close the computer systems, pull up the wires.
Yeah.
Now, with API banking, you have to actually open up all of this, right? So API banking means dragging and dropping and talking to your technologies internally, which means if you open up all of this, that means the security context is completely going to change. How do you even protect something which you've opened up, right? Whom do you give it to? When do you give it to? So I think the future is really, really interesting. And interestingly, it's not innovation from a security product perspective which is driving this. I think businesses are really driving transformation. And to keep up pace with the business, I think it's going to be very interesting and challenging for cybersecurity professionals and system controls and auditors and all of that. And I sometimes keep saying jokingly that auditing is a dying profession. I'm not sure. Of course, auditors are not going to die, but the way we do things would be completely different. And I just kind of said this in the conference here today, that please change the way you do what you do. Yeah. And I think all of this is driving.
Disrupt yourself before someone else disrupts you.
Absolutely. So.
Now, as we get to towards the end of the interview, I always like to ask the people that have graciously allowed themselves to be interviewed by me is to ask, what is some of the best advice that you've ever received to help you get where you are today?
Well, that takes me 20 years back. Interestingly, I'm actually a chartered accountant and not even an engineer. And seemingly, I have kind of spending my last 10 years in trying to do innovation technologically. Is a very senior guy walked up to me and said, why don't you think about technology and controls, because that's what is going to happen in 1999.
Yeah.
And normally you don't tend to listen to moms and dads and senior guys, right? So But surprisingly for me, I listened to this gentleman and I spent literally 2 years reading manuals of technology. So I would have gone through an SAP manual, a Java manual, a .NET. I didn't even know what the hell .NET was, right? I've read all of this in the manuals and literally put wires in the computers. And this is the way that I have learned technology, and very difficult to forget it if you learn it this way. And on the other side, because I understand the business, I'm now able to marry both of these and be able to have the use cases in the best possible way and so on and so forth. So I think this has really helped me to grow, and we've grown really, really fast. I think the only advice that I would want to give anybody, whether it's somebody in university or somebody's working, that typically if you spend a lot of time doing something in a way that you don't forget about it, and literally by hand in the first 3 or 4 or 5 years of your time, I think you end up understanding it far, far better. And I think, give all the credit to the so far success that we've had, I think to an advice that I got maybe 20 years back, which is really interesting.
Amazing. So, do you have any final messages for ITY viewers and readers, for your current and future customers, and for ISACA members?
Well, I think I've already passed on a couple of messages for members, and we've been speaking all day. But I think it's really interesting that you're running this session in ITY, and I think I would only want to impress upon all the viewers and people who come to your website and read articles that we always thought that the world is going to take a lot of time to change, right? But this is something which is not going to happen. This is something actually has already happened. All technologies that we talk about today are actually already available. They just getting into a commercial use, testing the time. So if you take too much time to innovate and think about it and maybe try and change what you're doing, then you're going to be left behind. And I'm going to follow this up with the last quote that I remember. I was in London and on a holiday to Cornwall, and I went to something called as Project Eden, and what I read there was really alarming and interesting. It said more and more people in the world are going to be less and less employable, and it's so amazing. Why? Because the skill sets of what people should be and should have is not consummate or in sync with what you need in the future. So on my way, I visited a McDonald's stall, and interesting, there was just one lady serving there. So I ordered on the machine, paid on the machine, and got the delivery on the machine. So interesting. And of course, you have several of these examples. So I think people would lose their jobs. So you need to really reinvent your skills to be up with time. I think it's a necessity. Not important, I think it's a necessity.
Absolutely. The McDonald's of the future will have no employees. The machines will make it in the kitchen.
I don't know if you watched this video, and it's available on the YouTube, the Amazon shop that they have in the United States.
You just walk out.
Just walk in and walk out. How cool it can be.
Well, there's another saying that I was mentioning today to one of the other ISACA members, and it's a famous saying, I forget who said it, but people can look it up, but it's that the future is already here, it just hasn't been widely distributed yet.
Absolutely.
And one of the examples was Apple's Knowledge Navigator, which was a video from 20 years ago, and a lot of the things I showed back then were just examples of what the future would be like, and 20 years later it's in all of our pockets.
Absolutely.
The future has been widely distributed, and so whatever else is coming, it's here. You've got to learn about it now, otherwise, like you said, you'll be left behind.
Correct. And I think it's so interesting to watch it from the other side. So for example, somebody's just walking in and walking out of the store. Now, while it's a great technology, can you imagine what do you do about controls? Can you imagine there's no receipts? Can you imagine there are no invoices? They're all emailed and done, and all of that in soft copy. So if all of that is there, we may not even have accounting tomorrow, right? So I think these are some really important questions that people need to ask themselves. And within an organization also, slowly but steadily innovate and spend some money on that. I think that's where we're going in the future. So very important for us to have an eye on that.
Anil, thank you very much. Wish you the best of success, and hope to talk to you again in the future.
Well, pleasure. Thank you so much. Wonderful to be in Australia. Canberra is a great city, and hoping to see you soon in Sydney, maybe. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much.